Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with James Dickman. Coming up tonight, the latest headlines concerning the capital, including the two Met police officers who have lost their appeal of their sentences after they were jailed for taking and sending pictures of two dead women whilst guarding a crime scene. The head of mental health care in England pays a visit to a school in West London as a plan to support millions of children with their mental health to cope with the unprecedented demand since the pandemic. We'll have an update on London's weather as well in the next 10 minutes. Also on the way, climate change art. Beautiful works at the Barbican that give a bittersweet reminder of the need to protect the planet with time running out. And stunning portraits of the Queen in a gallery on the Mall at an exhibition just a stone's throw from Buckingham Palace. We'll take a look at the work celebrating the upcoming Jubilee. All of that is on the way, but first let's have some of the main stories from London today. Two former Met police constables jailed for taking pictures and sharing photos of the bodies of murdered sisters Nicole Smallman and Bieber Henry have lost their appeals against their sentences. Denise Jaffa, who is 48, and Jamie Lewis, who's 33, were guarding the crime scene in Friant Country Park in northwest London, where the women were found in June 2020. They left their posts to take photos of the sisters and sent them to a WhatsApp group describing the victims as dead birds. They were each jailed at the Old Bailey in December for 33 months. The Mayor of London has blamed former US President Donald Trump for a rise in racial abuse he's had to face. Sadiq Khan says he's received at least 233,000 explicitly racist or racialised social media messages since being elected Mayor of London in 2016. The feud started in 2017 when Trump criticised him over his response to the London Bridge terror attacks. Well, racist abuse targeted at Mr Khan rose by nearly 2,000% in 2016, according to the Mayor's office, before increasing by a further 94% in 2017. The Mayor made the comments whilst pitching to tech investors in Silicon Valley as he travels around the US. The grime star Wiley is wanted by police after failing to appear in court on assault and burglary charges. A fresh appeal is underway to trace the 43-year-old musician, whose real name is Richard Cowie. He is accused of breaking into a flat and assaulting former kickboxer Ali Jacko. A warrant was issued for his arrest in September after he failed to turn up in court to face allegations where he's accused of breaking into the flat in Forest Gate in East London. That was in August, before smashing plates and assaulting Jacko. The rapper had been using Mr Jacko's recording studio before the pandemic. The murder investigation was launched after a man in his early 30s was stabbed to death this morning in Whetstone, that's in North London. The man was pronounced dead at a residential address off High Road after paramedics were called at around 2:45 a.m. and found the victim with stab injuries. The Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove has dismissed suggestions the government could hold an emergency budget to tackle rising costs. He said ministers were looking at ways to help, but talk of budget was simply the media chasing their own tails. Apparently, a number of ideas to help ease the situation are being considered, though, including proposals like changing the frequency of MOTs. We'll have more on a Stark report into the cost of living crisis just after the break. Now, more than 2.4 million children and young people now have access to mental health support in schools and colleges as a result of the NHS fast-tracking services to help address record demand. During a visit to Richard Challoner School in Kingston, the head of mental health care in England said it's now time for wider society to play its part in tackling the issue.
We're investing more, we're seeing more, we're growing the workforce more, and these teams in schools are an incredibly important part of that. But the NHS can't and shouldn't do this alone, and wider society absolutely needs to step up and play its part, whether that's social media companies, industry, schools and education, such as the fabulous school I've visited today. children's mental health, young people's mental health is all our business, and what we don't want to do is drive stress and pressure and medicalise things, when actually we could look at advertising, we could look at those social media companies, we could look at some of the products that are pumped at our young to idealise body images, diet lollipops, weight, gambling. There's a whole set of stuff online that can really drive poor mental health. So the NHS will step up and is stepping up and doing our bit, and I'm really delighted that we're ahead of plan with these mental health support teams in schools. But the NHS can't and shouldn't do this alone, which is why head teachers, such as the one whose school this is today, are an incredibly important partner in developing better mental health. But I've met the youth ambassadors in this school as well, and they are impressive boys who I think will take the challenge to wider society as well. They're stepping up and looking at better mental health narrative and language, more awareness raising, teaching younger children to talk about their mental health, so that there's an awful lot that others can do, and we don't just want to leave this to the NHS. We don't just want to wait until people are really sick or to have a society that drives poor mental health. We all need to step into this space.
There you go. Also today, the Prince of Wales and the Chancellor Rishi Sunak visited a clothing sports tour, JD Sports, in Woolworth in South London to meet young people supported by the Prince's Trust Kickstart scheme. The scheme, introduced by the government, offers financial support for employers to recruit those aged between 16 and 24. JD has been the Trust's largest Kickstart employer and has taken on more than 1,000 young people across the country.
He asked me what it is that we did in the gym, so I told him that I was doing personal training, so I was getting coached on things like that. And then we also looked at the management side, so I do a lot of the management side, and I have a management coach, so she helps me with that as well.
I counted 460 applications with no response, no feedback, so I didn't know what I was doing wrong or why I was getting rejected. Then obviously my work coach came over and gave me an opportunity to go through to the Kickstart scheme with M&S, and the rest is history. I'm working here, so I must be doing good. It's demoralising, it's depressing, because I don't know what I'm doing wrong, and it just makes me feel like I have no worth, basically. It puts you in a really, really bad mood, and just getting rejection after rejection is just ups and downs. You get called from your work coach saying, oh, you've got to do more applications, you do more, then you get rejected, and then you're back down to ground zero. So it's very, very emotionally stressful.
There you go. And in sport, Chelsea manager Thomas Tuchel admits the season is taking its toll on his players, with the weekend's FA Cup final against Liverpool moving ever closer into view. The Blues travel to play Leeds tonight in the Premier League. Despite a cup final, Tuchel's side still need to keep the results coming to maintain their league position in the top four for Champions League qualification. They currently sit in third, with Arsenal and Spurs 1 and 5 points behind, respectively.
We have a decent amount of wins. We have not a very high amounts of losses, but we have way too many draws, and a lot of draws where we were in leading position. So yeah, it was annoying, because we thought we have it. I thought we have it, and we had chances to score the third one. Yeah, we took a very offensive approach to the game to inject some energy and positivity, fluidity to our attacks. We played a bit too open through the whole match, allowed too many counterattacks, too many chances, partly to the approach that we took, but also to a huge part to the behavior within the structure. And still, I mean, we were there, we were almost there.
We'll have more on the title race after the break as the run-in for Liverpool and Manchester City hots up. Well, let's just take a look at the weather before a break. The cloud and rain will gradually clear away to leave most places dry, with some late sunny spells, a low of around 9 degrees overnight. Dry and plenty of sunshine tomorrow, around 18 degrees at its peak. Friday through to the weekend is a similar story, but getting warmer as we creep into those low 20s by Friday, with only a few patches of cloud around. Right, in just a few short minutes, billions of pounds worth of returned items that we assume go back into circulation after returning them following an online clothes shop actually head to landfill. We'll learn about a better way to combat the fast fashion trend. Welcome back. Let's take a look at some other stories affecting Londoners. An estimated 1.5 million households across the UK will struggle to pay food and energy bills over the next year as rising prices and higher taxes squeeze budgets. Well, that's according to the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, who predicted that the UK will fall into recession this year. It urged the Chancellor to do more to stop people sliding into debt and destitution. Well, it comes after the Queen's speech yesterday, which Labour said had fallen short on the cost of living. People will be given the right to vote on proposed property extensions in their area as part of a new planning reform, the government says. The plan sees previous proposals, which made it harder to block development, dropped after backlash from Conservative MPs as they feared the plans could cost them votes in crucial by-elections. And in sport, Pep Guardiola has compared Manchester City's title run-in for the Premier League to a tennis player serving to win a tournament. The City boss has been speaking before his side travelled to play Wolves this evening after Liverpool continued to mount pressure on Pep's men with a 2-1 win over Aston Villa last night. City and Liverpool are on 86 points each at the moment, but Jurgen Klopp's men have 2 games to play, whereas City have 3, including tonight's fixture against Wolves.
The most difficult service in tennis is the service you have to serve to be champion. So it's quite similar to that position. We need 6-7 points to be champion, and there will be the more difficult ones. These away games against Wolves, West Ham will be, well, we have to do the best of ourselves to do it.
Now, you're online shopping and like the look of 2 items. How many of us would admit to buying both with the intention of returning one? Well, have you ever thought about what happens to that returned item? New research from Wear, the sustainable clothing care company, has found that 40% of Brits believe it's sold back to consumers at full price, when in fact a huge chunk of returns actually end up in landfill. Well, Jonathan Hewlett, the CEO at Wear, is with me now. Jonathan, thank you for joining me. Firstly, let's talk a little bit about fast fashion. Kind of define what it is, because I'm not sure where the line is in terms of fast fashion, because there are some places that I get told are fast fashion, but I've had a T-shirt from there for 20 years. So what exactly is it, and why do people return so much from there, do you think?
Well, it's a great question. I think the first thing to say is fast fashion is more of a behaviour than a brand, and the stats kind of are clear. We own 3 times as many clothes as we did just 20 years ago, and we keep them for half as long. So the idea of buying something, wearing it a few times, and then disposing of it, which would have been something completely alien to our parents' generation, or even again not so many years ago, now becomes a normal behaviour. So that's what fast fashion is. To combat it requires behaviour change. It requires us to sort of stop and think: do we really need that new item? How many of those have we already got in the wardrobe? And what else have I got that could potentially be a perfectly good substitute for the thing that I'm considering buying? That's the first sort of thing that needs to happen, is the mindset. The second thing is bringing to the fore, as it were, an understanding for everybody of what it takes to get those items to you, what it takes to return them, and ultimately what happens to them. Because if we don't see any of this stuff, how do we know whether or not it's responsible behaviour or not? And that's if you think about, we live in an information-rich society. We want information on everything, whether it's sort of food ingredients, or whether it's carbon footprint by booking this flight. And I think getting that information out there to help people understand the consequences, the unintended consequences of their actions, such as I'll order 3 and send 2 back because I don't know what size I am, needs to be needs to be a bit more visible.
What needs to change then? What do you guys do a bit differently? And the fact in your research, a lot of people might not know, why do companies send perfectly wearable items to landfill just because they've been returned and haven't been worn for more than 10 minutes in front of someone's mirror?
It all comes down to complexity of movement and management of that product. If it costs more to get it back, to unbox it, to reprocess it, to rebag it, to reticket it and put it back on the shelf than it does in terms of the revenue or the profit they're going to get from that item, then of course the tendency will be, well, we'll take the cheapest option. And that, unfortunately, is creating this phenomenon where we're throwing away up to 34 tons of clothes literally every day in the United Kingdom. So that's where the crunch comes.
How does our mindset need to change then, and what do you guys do at Ware that tries to counteract that?
Well, I think the mindset can be changed by not necessarily punishing that behaviour, but more about incentivising the right kind of behaviour. So imagine a website where you're a loyal customer, you're a member of their program or their club or whatever, and you have an order history with them. The more efficient that order history is, the more rewards you can get. Something to incentivize the consumer to behave in the right way when it comes to ordering, returning, trying, not buying, etc. I think that's the first thing. How can we make it? We don't want to make it not easy for people to carry on doing what they do today, but rewarding the right kind of behaviour, I think, is the way forward. Now, what we do is, we have an electrical device, a cleaner, if you like, that cleans pretty much anything, whether it's a pair of shoes or a fabric-based item or clothing. We can clean and restore things very quickly, so that whatever comes back can be repurposed, and made new again, so it can be sold at full price and so on and so forth. So that's where we're trying to help. We're trying to help in if you like, that reprocessing of goods that are in the chain to give them a second life and a brand new one.
Jonathan, thank you very much for joining me.
Not at all. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Jonathan there from Ware, the sustainable clothes company. Now, staying with the environment and sustainability, a new exhibition at the Barbican is reminding us that we belong to an incredible ecosystem in perfect balance, or perhaps more than ever, the works in our time on Earth are a timely reminder of our connection to the natural world and how we can't afford to lose that balance as climate change and its effects intensify. Well, the exhibition is an immersive exploration of radical ideas for the way we live through art, science and activism. Let's take a look and learn a little bit more.
Our time on Earth is trying to take a different approach to looking at climate emergency. What we're really trying to say is that, open with a sense of awe, that we are a living being within a living planet. It isn't that incredible. We're trying to tell stories of the natural world in a way that's hopefully sort of places the visitor at the centre of them. And by giving them sort of inspiration and knowledge of the natural world, we hope that will lead to sort of a deeper sense of care. And ultimately the realisation that we are all interconnected within a living biosphere.
Wither is a work that talks about the deforestation happening right now in the Amazon. So we created this piece to just make people aware about how fast the deforestation is happening right now. So every leaf that you can see here in this work disappearing, it marks the loss of 128 square meters of rainforest disappearing right now in the Amazon. What inspired me in this work was actually the frustration. So because during COVID, in the beginning, there was nobody there to watch the deforestation, and it resulted in a 71% increase of deforestation. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take that invisible cutting down of the rainforest and make it visible to everybody. So basically turn the facts into a piece that you can feel something with. As an awareness artist, my job is to create as much visibilities for these invisible problems, and having a location where people pass by, thousands of them each day, to show the deforestation is something that for me is a dream.
So this is the Symbiocene. This is a project conceived with myself, Smith Mordack from Bureau Happold, my other colleagues at Bureau Happold and Julia Watson. And it is 3 visions for how we might live in 2040, where we hybridize the indigenous technologies with the kind of contemporary industrialized Western technologies that we kind of use in engineering. And the idea is to have a kind of really positive look at the future as to how we could incorporate different technologies in order to live regeneratively. I think a really important message is that we do have the solutions to address the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. they're not necessarily in the obvious places that you might look, but we do, if we look more broadly to more broader influences to indigenous communities that have been developing different techniques and technologies for hundreds, even thousands of years, we see that there are ways that we know how to live on Earth sustainably and regeneratively, and that we just need to look.
We created a work called Life Forces. It's an interactive installation that allows you to merge with different ecosystems. We're really inspired by dioramas at natural history museums, which we're both sort of quite fascinated by, and we wanted to create our own form of that using the tools of our time. So we created it with a game engine and used different kinds of 3D scanning technologies and sculpting to create these sort of ecosystems. And then we used human body tracking to allow people to interact with these sort of ecosystems. We're so excited to be part of this exhibition because it's so important to have so many different kinds of voices and ways of thinking about our futures and how we are sort of part of the planet.
I guess we wanted to take a more emotional stance within the conversations around climate emergency, and we've used a lot of technology within the exhibition as a tool and as a medium to sort of hopefully give people a sense of immersion.
Well, you can see our time on Earth. That's until August at the Curve area in the Barbican Centre. Right, you're watching London Live News with James Dickman. A reminder, our top story is coming up after the break, as well as portraits of the Queen have gone on display in a special exhibition at the Mall Galleries depicting her throughout her reign as monarch. We'll take a look and hear from the artists. Welcome back to London Live News. Let's just have a reminder of our top story from this evening. 2 former Met police constables jailed for taking and sharing photos of the bodies of murdered sisters Nicole Smallman and Bieber Henry have lost their appeals against their sentences. Dennis Jaffo is 48 and Jamie Lewis, who's 33, were guarding the crime scene in Friant Country Park in northwest London, where the women were found in June 2020. They left their posts to take the photos of the sisters and sent them to a WhatsApp group describing them as dead birds. They were each jailed at the Old Bailey in December for 33 months. Now, with the Jubilee drawing ever closer, portraits of the Queen have gone on display. Every year, the Mall Galleries hosts an exhibition from the Royal Society of Portrait Painters with some of the most famous works of the monarch on show. Well, we spoke to 3 artists who've had the pleasure of painting the Queen, ranging from her early reign through to her work during the pandemic. Let's take a look.
I've had the great pleasure of painting Her Majesty 5 times. One was a big full-length one, and then 2 commissions came up to paint her simultaneously. And also, at that time, there were 2 other requests for her to sit. So actually, I was painting about 4 of her at the same time. Different dresses, different background. And it was quite amusing, really. It was sort of, which dress am I in today? The one behind me for the Rifles Regiment just came out of the blue. I have a tendency to paint the human being, if I can. And, you know, I often say, the robes go on afterwards. The human being is there. I mean, mine is a reasonably informal one, with a formal background. She's sitting there looking, I hope, like I've painted her. That is the Queen. I haven't inserted anything. I have made a statement about the woman sitting there.
So we're standing in front of my portrait of the Queen here, which was commissioned for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in 2019. And it came on the back of me winning the BP Portrait Award the previous year, which sort of put me in the frame. So when I got the email, I sort of had to read it about 5 times, really, you know. And there's always an element of, I mean, obviously it's a great honour to be considered and asked to paint a monarch. But also there's a great deal of trepidation and fear around the whole process, because not every portrait of the Queen is greeted by the critics successfully. You know, it can be a little bit of a poison chalice for an artist, and I think you're very aware of that from the offset. But at the same time, it's probably a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for most artists. So of course you say yes, but you say yes, you know, with a bag full of mixed emotions, really, about the whole process.
My commission to paint the Queen came about through a prize that was sponsored by the Royal Society of Portrait Painters. And it was in, I think, 1995, and I'd entered the exhibition, the open submission, and just to get something exhibited, really. But in that year, it was not only a cash prize, which it is now, it was also a prize to paint somebody from public life. And the identity of the sitter was kept secret. Right up until the moment I got the phone call from the then President Daphne Todd. She phoned me at home. I had no idea, you know, I was just happy to get into the show. It was pretty amazing. My first sitting was the worst, I think, for me, because I hadn't met the Queen. I hadn't even been briefed on how to meet her or what the etiquette was. And I'd actually become quite ill a few days before. I'd picked up some kind of food poisoning, but I had to go through with it because it was, you know, you can't really counsel the Queen. She was also a bit of a moving target. She didn't really sit that still. So, and I wasn't really sure what I could say, you know. So I actually asked Robert Fellows, the then private secretary, if I could ask the Queen to sit still. And he said, yeah, well, you're the boss, you know, you go ahead and tell her. And so I did. I plucked up courage and I said, Mum, could you just stay still for a few minutes while I just work on one aspect of your face? And But then again, she was off. A few minutes later, and I think I only had one chance to do that. So that was my impression anyway.
The Queen was already she was 93, 94 years old when I was commissioned to paint this portrait. And then by the time, and they were really cutting back on sittings at that stage. So I had been told by her diaries that I might only get one sitting. And then I begged for a second sitting, which I eventually got. There was a 7-month wait between the first and the second sitting. And the second sitting happened literally, I think, about a week before we all went into lockdown. So COVID was just kind of beginning to unfold around the world. So the rest of the painting process was finished in lockdown. And maybe people were just desperate for good news because the whole world had been in lockdown. This footage just went all over the world in a way that I hadn't envisaged at all. So suddenly, yeah, I was just sort of contacted by media from all over the world, and I think actually that was when I realised what a truly global person she is. You know, that she's actually the entire world is fascinated by Queen Elizabeth II. She's really probably the most famous person in the world. I think that's when the penny dropped, actually, for me. So that was all very extraordinary, you know, and yeah, I just got media attention from everywhere.
Of course, when you get a commission to paint any of the royals, just commercially, of course, prestige, and you can fool a lot of the public a lot of the time. I mean, you're no better a painter the day after you've painted the royals than you were before. Yes, it's very good for the career. And you get the title Royal Portrait Painter and all this sort of thing, yes. You mustn't let that affect you.
And it's 25 years since I painted that, and I feel now that I'm part of that kind of lineage going right back, you know, to Van Dyck and Holbein. I don't think I'm on their kind of level, but I'm part of that, and it's that whole historical kind of process and history of painting, really, which I'm quite proud of, really, in a way. It's something that's really very significant.
It's just an extraordinary honour, really, and privilege to be asked to paint a monarch in the first place, but also to realise that you are part of this continuity of art history. And again, that dawned on me during my first sitting, actually. I thought, my gosh, this is what artists have been doing for hundreds of years. And that's quite a thought and quite a sense of responsibility, really, that you take to your task.
Those portraits of the Queen are on show at the Mall Galleries. We'll have an art review, Jubilee special, on Friday's show. Do tune in for that. Right, stay with us. We're heading into one final break. But when we come back, London Craft Week is back. For those with creative fingers in the capital, we'll hear about the festival with around 300 events, exhibitions and workshops to get your teeth into. Stay with us. Welcome back to the final part of this evening's programme. Now, whether you're a Londoner or not, there's something quite special about the London Underground. The transport network welcomes millions of visitors each year. But have you ever wondered about the many secrets of the Tube? Well, the new second series of the TV show Secrets of the London Underground has returned to our screens on yesterday with railway historian Tim Dunn and London Transport Museum's Siddy Holloway. Well, Henry has been speaking to the duo about the series.
This is the construction tunnel for the entire Jubilee Line concourse and the station we've walked through today. Now, this curve here is really unusual because it's actually avoiding Nelson's columns foundations. So we're just about walking underneath Trafalgar Square. For this series, we got to go to places that have been on the bucket list for ages. You know, we really got to just put out a wish list and then see if we could get access. And we really got some extraordinary access in this series.
Now, Tim, of course, millions of people travel on the Tube each year, from commuters to partygoers, tourists, sports fans. But there's so much of the Underground that we don't see. So what are some of the places that you explore, but also some of the abandoned spaces that you explore as well?
We see parts of stations that perhaps people will never get to see. So we see the Elizabeth line, which of course opens in a couple of weeks' time. It's been announced, and we get to go and see behind the scenes, because actually the stuff the public sees there is about 25% of the space they actually created. Now, there are all these dozens of plant rooms and computer control rooms and systems, and we get to go and show you behind what's behind those doors. So there's all the new stuff that you never get to see, and things like City gets to go down to Kingsway Tramway Tunnel, which is just sort of north by Aldwych, of course. In fact, I actually went with them. I'm not on screen, but because I enjoyed the series so much, it was my day off, so I go and explore it with them behind the cameras. It's so interesting. But seeing these spaces that are under our feet that you think you know, but just out of sight. And there's about 15 of these tube stations, City, I think, around that we looked at in this series, plus stuff out of London as well. There are old tube lines way out in the countryside that are, again, abandoned now, but they were once tube lines.
You know, what was your impression of the Elizabeth line? Because, you know, I actually have been lucky enough to see it, but so many people haven't quite yet, but it does open in a few weeks' time.
I mean, the Elizabeth line is going to be a complete game changer for London when it opens in a few weeks' time. And I've actually been lucky enough to see it at various stages of its construction. So, you know, I got to go and see it back in 2016 when the tunnels were still bare and they were still mining out the stations. And then now the finished product. And what was really nice for Secrets of the London Underground is Tim and I got to speak to some of the people who were really involved with creating the line and some of the challenges and some of the obstacles they had to overcome. You know, spoke to one of the chief engineers for Liverpool Street, and we got to go and see Farringdon, and Tim got to speak to an archaeologist. So we just got to really kind of delve into the extraordinary work that lies behind this amazing line that is going to completely revolutionize travel in London. I'm so excited for it to open because I think I don't think that people grasp how much it will change their journeys through London until they just start using it. So these are original tiles from 1890 from the City and South London Railway. And this would have been the passageway off the platform and up here and up into those hydraulic lifts.
Every Londoner has their own favourite fact or quirk to do with the Underground, and as both of you have such fantastic knowledge about the Tube, I wanted to know your favourite quirk or fact.
There are so many, how can I choose just one? The episode that airs this week on Thursday at 8 p.m. on Yesterday will feature the Waterloo and City line. And now a lot of people don't think about the Waterloo and City line as being part of the Underground because it was actually built originally by South Western Railway. But the fun fact that I'm going to put out into it is that it's actually the second oldest deep level tube in London.
The Tube is so important, it's an icon. Why does it carry so much significance?
I think for all of us living in London, it has powered our daily lives and our lifestyles we live today. As you said, it's a party-goer's place. It's a commuter's place. It genuinely has built this city, and city is built on the tube. Look at the Metropolitan line. It created Metroland. Everything in northwest London really is there because of the tube. The city couldn't function, we couldn't function, and so many of our lives today, mine certainly revolves around the tube and the way we use it. So an iconic structure, systems, designs and posters, roundels, typefaces, it's in every part of our daily lives, and I'm so proud to be someone who uses it every day.
And Sidi, now, do you have a reason why you love the tube so much?
I mean, lots of it. So I'm originally from Iceland, so grew up with no trains whatsoever. And then when I moved over to the UK 12 years ago, I was always fascinated by the underground. But I think that's something that I think Londoners and kind of take for granted, that we have this extraordinary system. But it is actually mind-blowing and world famous. I mean, the roundel that you see behind me here is one of the most recognised symbols in the world, and it is synonymous with the city. Anyone could look at that and go, oh, that's London. And that's its transport network. And I think we take that a little bit for granted sometimes, of just what an impact our system has had on the rest of the world, and how fascinating and interesting it all is. So I just think, for me, it's such a privilege to be able to tell that story, because it's not just about the trains or the tunnels, it's about Londoners and the people that have used it and built it and keep on kind of progressing it to fit the needs of Londoners today.
Secrets of the London Underground is on every Thursday at 8 on the channel yesterday. Now, a festival which celebrates the best of craftsmanship from around the world is here in the capital, and it's taking place in various locations across London this week. It features more than 300 events, from workshops, pop-up stores to exhibitions and immersive experiences. Well, Jonathan Burton is the managing director of the London Craft Week, and he's been telling Alicia more.
It's a citywide festival. We're in our 8th year, and there are 300 events taking place across the city this week. And really, it's a celebration of craft and creativity. It's international. I think we see London very much as a kind of cultural, international cultural hub. And we have artists and makers really from across the UK and then from 26 countries.
How does it work? How do people get involved?
There are 300 events taking place across the week. Many of them are free to attend, some are ticketed. People can get further details on what's happening near them via our website, which is londoncraftweek.com. But as you sort of expect, there's core crafts, so there's ceramics and jewellery and metalworking and woodworking, the things that perhaps you'd expect with something called London Craft Week. But also you find artists and makers from some of the luxury fashion houses demonstrating their skills. So, for example, you'll find someone at Delvaux demonstrating how to make a handbag from Thursday. But it's the breadth of it really that's kind of extraordinary, and the festival's grown fourfold really in the last 8 years. And I think when we talk about craft, we think about it in a very broad sense. So you'll find fragrance, you'll find food. There's ice cream tastings, for example, this week as well. But the main purpose, I think, with Craft Week is a celebration of artists makers and giving them their moment in the spotlight to be able to show what they do and their skills and creativity. And I think there are people that are perhaps quite well known within the sector, but the festival is also an opportunity to discover new talent.
Does it encourage people to get crafting themselves?
I hope so. I mean, I guess that sort of London Craft Week is both, should be an inspiring experience for people. It's that ability to get close to someone making something extraordinary and to hear directly from them about their inspiration, how they've come into the sector, and perhaps to understand the materials they're using. There's a strong sustainability story as well within the craft sector. Craft by its very nature, there's lots of objects obviously made from natural materials, but they're also built to last. And that feels super relevant at the moment. And I think you can see within the craft sector generally, there's a much broader story, also a contemporary story in that area. We have people talking during the festival about new materials made from, new leathers made from mushrooms, people producing fabrics from bacteria, pigment dyes that are made from bacteria as well. So there's a tech end to it as well. It's not just kind of those traditional skills.
Do you think there's been more of an interest in people getting creative since the pandemic, people having more time to focus on things that they're passionate about, perhaps?
Yeah, certainly. And I think we can see that kind of across the festival. Both artists, makers who have produced new bodies of work during the pandemic, after a terrible 2 years, it's great that there are some positives that come out of it. And whether that's people, as you say, acquiring new skills or working collaboratively with partners that perhaps they weren't before. So there's definitely kind of new work that's coming through, and people kind of taking their work in new directions. And of course that filters through to all of us. I think people are much more kind of interested in craft and creativity and exploring our own, individual potential, and the festival celebrates that.
What does the festival do for the people involved? How important is it to get themselves out there, particularly, independent businesses and creators?
So I think it is important for them. It creates a kind of platform for them to be able to sell and promote their work. And the festival attracts an enormous number of people. I mean, we have sort of just under 100,000 visitors to the festival each year. So it's both an opportunity to raise their profile, but obviously to make sales. And producing crafted objects takes time, and so therefore it's not always easy to produce work in volume, and therefore it's also harder, obviously, to make a living from that. So it is important. It attracts a lot of attention internationally and from the UK. We see, for example, buyers from a lot of the big department stores engage with the festival. So they're looking to pick up new talent to then be able to sell, to sell more widely.
London Craft Week, that's on until Sunday. Now, let's take one last look at the weather before we leave you this evening. The cloud and rain will gradually clear away this evening to leave most places dry and some late sunny spells, hopefully. A low of around 9 degrees overnight. Dry with plenty of sunshine tomorrow, around 18 degrees at its peak. Then Friday through to the weekend. A similar story, but getting warmer as we creep into those low 20s with only a few patches of cloud around on Friday. Right, that is all we've got time for this evening. Thank you for watching. Do join us again tomorrow at the very same time. Plenty more content on our social media channels, though. Follow us at London Live. But for now, good evening and take care.